dearie me, I'm not very impressed by that performance. Hello everyone, I'm High Treason. If you just want the music, check the bookmarks, you can skip ahead. For everyone else, this isn't the video I planned to do now, but everything else sort of, it's taking longer than expected, so we'll probably get to that in March. And what I'll try doing for now is I'll try and get the video on that other PC done a little bit early. So, yeah, You know, the thing with anything you read in magazines, especially about synthesizers and on the internet, is it's unreliable, it's usually wrong, so you kind of have to test these things for yourself. And I was unsure of what I was getting into here, so it was a case of I've got to buy one of these things and try it and see what it does. And it doesn't seem to be very good at that electronic sound. It's actually sounded like RPL2 a lot of the time with the bass line. I really tried to tame that, but it just didn't want it, and I couldn't get a tom sound because the pitch envelope on it's weird. It really doesn't do what you think it's going to do, and it just goes kind of squelchy. So I'm not really sure what to think of that, and what I think we're going to have to do is just perk the thing around. I'll walk you through what it is and what some of the things on it do, and we'll play it by hand a little bit and get a feel for it, and who knows, maybe we'll find something for it to do, but I'm not entirely sure at this point. And I don't know, I mean, this was meant to be Casio's flagship in 1988. It came after the CZ-1. You'd think it'd be a more capable synthesizer. I mean, it's interactive phase distortion. We had phase distortion before, and that was good. So interactive phase distortion with 8 lines, you know, you think, oh, that's going to be quite a big piece of kit, and I'm not seeing it. So yeah, maybe we'll find out. Maybe we'll get somewhere. But I'm not overly sure. And I suppose we'll get on with that then. I don't imagine this is going to be overly long.
Casio did get a lot of things right with the design of the VZ-1. It certainly looks serious, but I actually prefer the dorky colours on the CZ-1 because it had some level of personality. The VZ-1 could easily be any other pro synth of its time, at least from a distance, though having a graphical display on an 80s machine is definitely a little jarring. It's not something you usually see. The thin sheet steel and plastic of the CZ-1 are no more. The VZ-1 uses extruded aluminum, but this makes it a dirt magnet and less hard wiring. Mine was quite broken when I got it. It's also a pain in the ass to work on because unlike the CZ-1 where the top comes off and you can service it on the keyboard stand, the VZ-1 has you tip it upside down and take 40 screws of differing types out before you can even touch anything. Unfortunately, I don't have the room to do this on camera because I live in a 12-foot square pressed cardboard box, so, well, this is the best I can do for you. The keyboard actually feels nice, where the CZ-1 has a distinctly fluffy sort of feeling, which is good for an electronic instrument, where weighted keys make no sense. The VZ-1 has a distinct prang about it. Although where the CZ-1 is unusually and beautifully quiet, this thing's a little noisy by comparison, but it's not horribly so, compared with if we go back in time to when I owned the DX7. That wretched thing, it's got to be the loudest keypad I've ever encountered. That thing was dreadful. What's peculiar about the keys on this is that the whites are just a little bit shorter than normal, so I keep mangling my nails against the flats because I already struggle due to having large hands. Seriously, all the world's supposed best pianists are Asians with little tiny fingers, not people with massive Westerner hands like mine, and even though mine are large for somebody in this part of the world. Somebody's going to go on and on about my positioning of fingers and stuff, and I've never had a single piano lesson. I wouldn't want to. Can you tell? Yeah, well, I think I'd get used to it if I just kept playing it, but I'm not sure I'd really want to do that. Also, it does have velocity sensitivity, which is great over MIDI, but on the instrument itself is completely useless because the ramp for it looks something like this no matter how you configure it, or for that matter, even if you are driving it from MIDI, meaning it's the instrument that just isn't very expressive. This wouldn't matter so much if it was good at making electronic noises, but as we just established in the song we've heard, it's not really very good at doing that, so it would leave you with something, maybe you would want this feature, and yeah, it just doesn't work very well on here. Also, occasionally you'll notice that some notes sound radically different. Or they'll sound unusually quiet. Let's compare an electric piano sound on this versus my CZ-1. I thought this was diodes going bad in the keypad until I realised that the instrument is just a bit glitchy like that. It's obviously something internal with sounds come out of the processor in this. It's not like it has a dedicated synthesizer chip. So it's obviously something with the way it's been written in there. I don't know. It's not like I've reverse engineered the code that this thing's running or anything. Also, the pitch of things can change slightly if you have certain menus open which have nothing to do with the pitch envelope, which is odd to say the least. One thing that always puzzled me about the older CZ-1 was people claiming it was a hard synthesizer to program, because you have to wonder what they were even comparing it to. It is, in fact, one of the easiest digital synthesizers, if not the easiest to program, because everything on it is pretty obvious. You want to mess about with the amp envelope? Well, then press the envelope button for the digitally controlled amplifier and change it. Even if you don't know how the synthesizer works, it becomes immediately apparent, audibly, what any given parameter is going to do to the sound, and then you can just do it by feel and instinct from there. Indeed, while the two things are very different, the CZ handles a lot like an analog synthesizer, where you take any of the 8 basic waveforms it has, which is more than most synthesizers have, and it's pretty useful, and build your sound from there, possibly even stacking 2 waveforms. If you've programmed one of these, you will know the digitally controlled waveform section is where the real magic happens to shape your sound. It's like the filter on an analog subtractive synthesizer like the Prophet here. Yeah, it's basically the equivalent of turning those knobs. In the case of that and the CZ, you don't really need to know how the synthesizer works internally, but you probably should at least have a vague idea, because it certainly helps to make the process faster and lets you think ahead. So what about the VZ-1? Well, you've got 8 lines in 4 pairs instead of the 2 lines in a single pair of the old CZ, so it should be able to make some very big sounds and pretty complex stuff, you would think. The problem is that while we might now have the pretty graphic display that I don't actually use, Casio did away with the DCW section entirely. What happens is that your kind of using the DCA section of the previous line par, almost like the DCW section of line 2 in the next par, to modulate that.
You do realise what they've done, don't you? You do realise what's going on here. You can just mix all 8 lines together if you wanted to. I mean, you can turn individual lines on and off, so you don't have to have all of them. But that's not going to do much, because no DCW section. It's not there. It's not a thing, and that's your magic shape all the sound bit. That's like your filter on an analog synthesizer, and it's not there, so you can't do much with that, and so it's not a thing now. And so it's quite obvious what they wanted us to do was use the ring and phase modulation. So it's basically FM synthesis. And I hate FM synthesis. FM synthesis is garbage. Why would you do that? Everyone else was making them. Why would you want to make them as well? They're trash. You know, I don't get that. There's people out there who like to pretend that they like FM synthesizers. I've never heard them make any actual music with them. You know, when I say I like the CZ-1, I can back that up, because I've made loads of music with the damn thing, more music than you've ever heard online. And, you know, I've at least got credentials to back that up, even if I'm not really that great at this sort of thing. These people don't, and they like to pretend, well, you just hate it because you don't know how it works, you don't know how to use it. Which is completely wrong, because I hate FM synthesis, because I'm one of very few people on this planet who actually does have some semblance of an idea of how it works. And how it works, the short version is, you know when you were in higher education and they made you do a load of trigonometry and a load of calculus, and some people really enjoy that sort of thing. I don't. I don't find that sort of thing fun. And I mean, no disrespect to people who do. If you like that sort of thing, I actually think that's kind of cool. But it's not my kind of thing. I don't want to sit there doing that. I want to make music. There's not really what you're doing essentially, because now instead of the DCW, your module of 2 lines is essentially the DCW controlling the other wave. You are shaping a waveform using another waveform, and this tends to produce a lot of artifacts that you don't want. The waveform ends up looking like noise. You need to be good at audio engineering to do anything with it, and I'm bad enough at composition, never mind audio engineering. You add effects to hide it, well, you're just going to be adding delay and reverb and chorus, whatever, to your waves that are in there that you don't want, that are underneath. It's just, it turns into noise. It's not really a good way of doing synthesis, and I don't understand why it was so abundant at the end of the 80s. If you're doing some Samantha Fox shit where the quality doesn't matter and you're going for the vocals of the lady trying to sound seductive and the music's unimportant, then yeah, maybe you'll get away with it, but to make like proper music, it really doesn't have much of an application. So I'm not very impressed by that at all, and not looking good, but well, let's continue on, I suppose. Let's see what we can do with this, but is it even worth me trying to program this thing anymore? I don't like FM synthesis, it's bad.
FM synthesis takes the principles of building a sound that we talked about just a moment earlier, employed on basically every other synthesizer, and throws it in the bin. Now, rather than starting with your basic waveform and knowing what things will sound like, you start with the building blocks and use several of the lines just to set up the waveform you want. Granted, we're not limited to just a sine wave on here like Yamaha trash. I mean, let's have a look. We've got saw waves and saw waves, and well, basically we've got 5 saw waves, and that's your lot, aside from noise, which isn't overly useful in most applications. Anything you might do won't sound anything like the final sound you want. So you're just prodding in the dark, because you need to build up the thing you want to sum with the other thing in order to get another thing that's nothing like the things that make it in the thing it is. By now, you've got nowhere near enough lines left to make anything particularly interesting happen, so your range of sounds is quite limited if you want to do anything useful. Oh, you can make a lot of sounds with FM, but generally they're just raspy phasing noises that aren't useful in songs, and certainly don't inspire you to do anything when you're playing around with it. It will never just put an idea in your head of, oh, I could use that and I could do this. It's just like, oh man, what is this crap? Get that off.
Something like that for. You know, there's just an endless supply of this that comes right in the instrument. It inspires nothing. It inspires picking the thing up and throwing it out the fucking window, and that's about the extent of it. Useless.
Also, the more lines you add, the more washed out your sound's going to become. If you want to make use of FM synths, you generally need a long chain of FX gear to cover up the fact it's an FM synth at all. But this tends to cost more than the instrument, so you might as well just buy a different synthesizer. And anyway, the only FX gear I have is the AD input on the front of my MU90R. So that, and let's have a listen to that square wave from the first song in isolation without any effects, and therefore nothing happening to try and hide all of the weird underlying phasing from the math that's going on under the hood. And of course compare that with the CZ-1, which technically doesn't produce true square waves either, but it's certainly much more pleasant to listen to. I mean, gee, that was really nice of the VZ-1, wasn't it, to just totally tear our eardrums to bits like that. You also have noticed that the portamento mode is utterly useless on it, as it's quite unpredictable. It sounds a little bit like an Odyssey with a dirty sync switch. You might also have noticed how it chews on chords and culls notes for no apparent reason, despite having a 16-note polyphony. And my suspicion is, if it's not an underpowered processor, which I don't think it is, it could also be related to the portamento mode, because there's no way to turn that off, only set a 0 time. And incidentally, in the next song, we'll be doing this on purpose on the CZ-5000, because my steel wind sound requires it there. You might notice it behaves uncannily similar, but you can of course turn portamento off on the CZ series, and so they don't tend to start chewing and culling notes unless you're exceeding the 8-note limit. Overall, I quickly deemed that the VZ-1 wasn't really worth attempting to program, because almost any sound you might want to use could be made better by something that isn't trying to be an FM synthesizer. Every so often you might run across a sound on an FM synth that you like, but when you stop and think about it, where would you ever use it in a song? Would it really be worth the effort involved to even make it work? Nearly every time, another instrument would do it better. With that said, it's actually ridiculous how easy to program this thing is, as far as FM-type synthesizers go, and it's certainly better than anything Yamaha made by rather a long way. But it's a major step backwards from its predecessor, and the fact it sounds blatantly like every other FM synth makes it boring. The CZ's PD synthesis was actually interesting because it was unique. There aren't any other synthesizers that sound quite the same, but with the VZ-1's IPD engine, that sort of thing's very rare, and if you did produce an entire record with it, I think people would be hard pressed to figure out whether it was this or a DX27 or something.
Well, as noted, I live in a 12-foot cardboard box, so I don't really have the room to keep a 61-key synthesizer around, and I'm not using and the thing's pretty worthless. And it's probably worth a bit more than when I got it now, considering it was busted when I got it, but my plan was, you know, I love my Prophet 5, but the thing needs constant repairs, right? It wants... I hardly get to use it, because I use it like once, and then the keybed shits the bed again, and I've got to open it up and polish up the brass contact rod and faff about with things. And should I just flog that if I can get another synthesizer to do something else that's interesting? You know, my Odyssey will do analog stuff just fine. I don't need that much polyphony. I can do it with a mono synth, which, I mean, that thing's duophonic technically, I guess, the Odyssey, but whatever, that's for another day. So I was like, well, this thing, you know, it sort of comes off like it's just a beefed up CZ. It's like a CZ with 8 lines on it. That should be really cool. You can make some really fat noises with that. Also, well, of course you can't, because you're using most of those lines just to shape your sound. We've got no square waves. You don't realise how much you use them until you don't have them. I mean, what is it, JX3P or something? You know. So as it is, the thing's probably more use to me as parts, because if it has parts in that are hard to get and quite costly, they cost more than the synthesizer that would be useful in other things. And so there's a good chance I'm just going to strip it down and that's going to be the end of it. And I don't feel good about it, because I want to like the thing. I really, really want to like it. I'm trying to like it, but it's just doing nothing to convince me to change my mind. And so I think at this point all we can really do is make one more song with it. We know it's not good with the electronic sounds that we tried in the first song. It's not going to be. So maybe it'll do the uncanny sound that my Buck soundtrack has. So I've got an unfinished song. I've adapted it and extended it a bit to use both synthesizers, and that should have... I want to sound in a lot of that soundtrack where it doesn't really sound inherently electronic, but doesn't really sound really acoustic either. Like I say, it's meant to be a little bit uncanny, is kind of what I've been going for with it, and maybe it'll be good at that. Maybe it'll be pretty good at that with the coldness of FM synthesis. It might come into its own. It probably will struggle in the first section, because there's some voice stuff and a steel wind, I call it there. It's like a weird windy flute sound. It's not going to do so good at that, because the pitch envelope just never really seems to work the way you think. It doesn't really... I don't know. It just doesn't do what I tell it. It just seems to do its own thing a lot of the time. Depends what menu you have on the screen. That will affect it slightly for some reason. It's quite a glitchy instrument. And yeah, but the other things in it, it might come into its own, and with any luck, it might convince me to change my mind. So it's, yeah, it's may well be its very last song, unfortunately, because I just can't justify keeping it if it doesn't give me some reason to do it. I guess we better get on with that. I don't feel good about this. I really don't know. What do you think about that? I want to like it. I really want to like this machine. I really do, but I don't think it's done enough. I really don't. I gave it every unfair advantage there. I allowed doubling up the sounds and using additional effects and stuff with it. You know, before I was just dropping it on the same effects as the CZ-1. On this I adjusted things greatly just to try and give it every advantage I could. And it held its own a little in the strings. Just a little bit. It was actually, other than it's stumbling over chords and chewing notes up there, just culling them like crazy, which I still don't know for sure why it does that, and it's really annoying. It almost did it, but I just don't think it's done enough, and I think it's just going to have to go for scrap, because I don't... Could I just sell my Prophet 5 anyway and stick it, the VZ-1 there doing nothing? I could, but at least if I repair my Prophet 5 I can actually use that to make music. It's just that it will break again, and I'm going to try replacing parts in that keyboard, and with any luck that will solve that. But I've got too many other things to do for now. The VZ-1, I'm just never going to use the thing. But there are parts out of it that I can use. So maybe that's for the best in the long run. I don't know. But I maybe I'll change my mind, but at this point I don't think we're going to see it again. I just don't. And Casio really dropped the ball here, I feel. And it's a shame. I think it's, you know, it's a testament to how good Casio did things at the time. That the one thing they did that sucked was a copy of everybody else's stuff. It's the one time they didn't do their own thing. And they were at least a little bit smarter than most of the others, because they never did this again. The VZ-1 is the only IPD keyboard, and there's only 2 modules, and it came out about the same time. And then that was it. Unfortunately, they also left the professional instrument space, which is crap, because everything else they made pretty much, they usually made interesting things. And you know how much I like the CZ-1. But in that there's an interesting point, because people do like to say this VZ-1 is better than the DX7. I tend to agree. If you like the sound of FM, it's a far more capable machine than the Yamaha keyboards of the time. And it's far easier to use, and it's far less glitchy, so it just seems that you always have some weird quirks with FM synthesizers. So I'd actually recommend it for people like that, if that's your sort of thing. If you like gouging your eardrums to pieces, then go for it. But otherwise, just, yeah, you know, there's always that argument, isn't there? Is the DX7 or the CZ-1 better? Well, the CZ-1, until I got one, nobody gave a fuck about. You know, it wasn't until I got back into synths in the mid-2010s and I started using the Casio CZ, they were fucking worthless, nobody cared about them, oh, those are garbage. As usual, I do all the work and get no fucking credit, because how much are they worth now? How much do people want them now? Yeah, who else was making music with them for most of that time? Yeah, fucking me, really. And a few other people turned up over time. You know, as usual, I get screwed. You know, it's the way it always goes. But that's not the point today. I'll complain about that again another day. And hey, if this was any other YouTube channel, I'd have 5-figure bloody subscriber count by now. You can guarantee. You know, sure have been fucked, haven't we? But anyways, I'm going to mention that in every video this year, by the way. I'm going to totally whine and bitch about it. But yeah, CZ-1 just kicked this thing's ass. The synth that nobody loved, and look at what it did today. You know, you think the DX7's even in the same fucking league as the CZ-1. No, not even close. Not even worth comparing the two. So, yeah. What did we learn today? Well, the DX7's garbage, the VZ-1 is a disappointment, and the CZ-1 and the 5000, let's not forget, I mean, that thing was pulling a heck of a lot of the weight in that song. It's the same engine, it just doesn't have velocity on it or anything like the CZ-1. It's the same synth engine internally. It's yeah, those kick ass. So, you know, and the Prophet 5, when the keyboard works, kicks ass. So, I don't know. I don't really think I have much of anything else to say. Well, I do. I could stand and rant till the end of time. You know what I like. But I'm not going to. I'll save you that. So, yeah, probably this PC that I was going to do, I'll try and get that done a couple of weeks ahead of schedule. Then we'll probably do some electronics in March. And I don't have a set schedule or anything. I had a rough goal of nearly one video a month. So I'll try and stick to it, but I can't promise. So, yeah. I have, let's not forget that I do have another channel on which I play games. This is my gaming channel. A lot of my old PCs get to be, you know, doing stuff on there. And occasionally I do faff about and learn the video game music. Just sort of dick around at the end of a video. Very rare, so I don't expect to see that all the time. I did in Nitemare 3D, especially in the latter half of that. And occasionally I live stream and stuff, so if that's your sort of thing, by all means go and have a look at it. I do have a Discord server which is bloody horrible, both linked in the description. I'm not going to say anything about the buttons under this because I think people who do that are twats, so it's down to you. I'm not going to force you, or am I? I could force you. No, that I could as well, that would be fun. I thought, well, this is how I get myself beat up, isn't it? Anyways, yeah, no. Disappointed with the instrument. It might change my mind yet. I'll probably keep messing about with it, but I'm definitely confident saying the CZ-1's the better of the two, and the VZ-1 is better than anything Yamaha made. You can see why the Korg M1 was so popular when that came the same year, because that did things different. I don't know what it is about late 80s synths just being garbage. The M1 did really well, and it's obvious why. When you look at it now in hindsight. So I'm High Treason, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again quite soon. Not super soon, but soon enough. I suppose I'm supposed to say my line about, and remember, don't be a screw up, load DOS622 it, but we didn't do that today. Look, if this, I'm sorry if this isn't your thing, but we are going to start seeing less PCs over time. I'm not going to milk that to death like other people who may be contractually obligated to do it. I'm not. And so I'd rather just slow it down with dignity, if that's the way it's got to be, rather than talk about the same thing over and over again. I'm out of here anyway. Thanks ever so much for watching, as always. I'll see you around. Yeah, there are a couple of things I probably should have mentioned, but you remember me saying it was broken? Well, what was really weird with that is, yeah, it was mangled, but not super mangled, and most of the damage actually seemed to be sabotage. My synthesizer came with the service manual and the blown up schematic of it. This thing unfolds, it is massive. And somebody, I couldn't figure out why, because it didn't really look like there was an attempt to repair. But somebody had fiddled with it to disable writing to program memory, or else what they'd done prevented that. If it was doing anything else, I couldn't figure out what. Which is odd, because the second DX7 I owned had the same thing done to it. In that case it was clearly deliberate, but I don't know why they did it to this. So, yeah, it was... I mean, obviously they were being serious about whatever they were trying to do, so I've got no idea. Price, I didn't mention the price. When they came out, they were about £1,000, I think about 2,000 US dollars, if my memory of the exchange rate at the end of the 80s is right. So it wasn't cheaper than a DX7 II, but I would wager you could probably have bought a used DX7 I at the time for less than this, if you knew where to look. And I think other companies had made FM synths by then, so yeah, small wonder it didn't sell very well. It's a real shame. Still want to like it, but I still also kind of hate it, so I don't know what the future holds for it, but you know, at least we've had a look, and at least now we know, I suppose. I guess I better get out of here and get this edited, and probably find some footage I forgot to record or something. You can bet that's going to happen. Guarantee. Always happens. Probably see me in a different t-shirt somewhere.
Stupid camera's microphone malfunctioned, so I needed to record a clip of me pressing the keys. You know, I said the audio output went. Check this out. It's dead. Wonderful. Who cares?